Yeah, fair enough. Okay, well, greetings everyone. Thanks for joining us on this lovely Saturday. And I think we should hop into the presentation David has for us, and then we'll go around the room once Dave's done with whatever time we have left. And you are muted, by the way.
So I am not. Whoops. I am not anymore, correct? Okay, well, this is the first time I've tried to do this, but I hope I will be able to figure it all out as we go along. My topic today is Rdif Backup. And so I'm going to show you some slides if I can. Share my screen. Okay. Now, am I sharing my screen at the moment? No?
You are.
I am. Okay. I thought I would be. Okay, do you see the why do backups? Hello?
Yep, we see it.
Oh, okay, good. So why do backups? Well, lots of reasons, but you may have a hardware failure. The disk may crap out, or the entire computer system. There may be a natural disaster. You never know when that's going to happen around here. Vandalism, that doesn't seem to be a big problem. The fourth one is the biggest of all, human error. It seems to me that the main reason for that I've ever had for needing a backup is because I screwed up somehow and deleted a file that I didn't mean to delete. But of course, it's all fun. So there are several different ways you can copy files in Linux. I don't know whether this is a complete list, but it's certainly the principal ones. DD is scarcely a way we really shouldn't be talking DD in the same breath as backups, because DD is a really dumb way of copying anything. It just copies an entire disk partition bit by bit without any knowledge or caring of what it's copying. It doesn't have any knowledge of the file system that it's copying, if there is one or if there isn't one or anything. It just copies a stream of bits, and you can do with it what you wish. I mean, the one thing that DD might be good for is if you have a disk that's going bad and you want to make sure that without any delay whatsoever, you can copy that entire disk or some substantial fraction of it off to some safe place and then deal with the copy. But it's not a backup. CP, of course, copies anything you like. It'll copy stuff, and recursively it'll copy entire file system subtrees, but it does so, shall we say, without thought. It just copies what you tell it to copy, period. Same thing for find and CPIO, and the same thing is true for tar. Now, Rsync, on the other hand, is really a very smart program. it allows you to make an image or update an image of an entire subtree over on some other medium someplace. And what it will do is it'll determine what needs to be copied because it's different than what's already been copied. So it only copies the minimal amount of stuff, and it will so it will give you a instantaneous image of your source directory tree over on some other medium somewhere. It also has the rather useful property that if it gets interrupted in the middle of things, it will pick up again when you restart it and pick up where it left off. That is to say, it doesn't redo a whole bunch of copying that is unnecessary to complete the project. Rdif Backup is like Rsync, but it's different in that not only does it make an image of the source directory tree, but it retains indexes to what has been displaced, so that you can then go back later and recover not only the last thing that got backed up, but also
Did anyone else lose audio?
Can't hear Dave.
Yeah, Dave, we've lost audio for you. I don't know if you can hear us or not. Dave, could you, if you can hear us, can you swap?
Dave.
Dave? If you can hear us, could you swap to your camera and give us a thumbs up?
Looked like he had one of those disasters he was talking about.
Right.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if he's happily talking, unaware that we can't hear him, or if he's aware of the problem, is trying to resolve it.
Can you hear me now?
We
Yes.
can hear you now.
Yes.
Okay, well, what just happened is my computer crashed.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm back, and I don't know for how long. But we'll see. Hang on, I want to get things started again.
Good thing you got a backup, Dave.
Yeah, well, you just go through the motions.
One thing I would add to your list of why backup, which is very pertinent and certainly in the Windows world and very much in my world, ransomware, which certainly goes under vandalism, but it's its own particular type of vandalism with a monetization aspect.
Excellent thought.
I heard or read somewhere that 400 hospitals across the U.S. had been hit with ransomware.
Yep. The one in Vermont Medical Center has been hit. And when you come into state from another state, you have to self-quarantine for 7 days and then get a COVID-19 test and come back negative. They're not doing any tests because their computers are down, and they've been working on it for over a week. So it's really messing things up.
The other, well, I will let Dave continue, but we can talk about that when if we go around the room later, because that's something I've been fighting at work. You know, so far so good on our systems, but it's something very much on our mind.
Yes, that's a wonderful idea. I will add that to my list of things if you know, for the archives. Okay, so let's move on to how I use Rdif Backup. I have Dadium is my main machine, and so it's the thing I want to back up. Dat Bird is the destination machine, and it's got a gigantic 3 terabyte disk, which with a B1 backup file systems set aside just for the purpose. So on Dadium, I want to store main boot, which is just a little thing that helps boot the system, root and home and H1. B1 and F31 don't need to be backed up. B1 is a backup file system for other machines. F31 is an archival thing. It's the operating system previous to the one I'm currently using, F32. Okay, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4 mountable partitions on the disk of Dadium, and I'm going to create on Dat Bird in B1, I'm going to create 4 separate subdirectories to back up each one of those 4 things. They're not equal sized by any means. Main boot, of course, is little. Root is, well, it's marginal to know whether you need to back that up. Home is a whole nother matter. I definitely don't want to lose what's in home or in H1. Okay, next slide. So here are the partitions I've created in B1 on Dat Bird, a Dadium.rdif, and inside of that I have a main boot, or a root, a home, and an H1 directory. So that's where the stuff is going to go to. And here's how you put it there. This is this little script I wrote to do the job. It gets run as a cron tab. In my case, once a week. So the first step is to echo out that this is the starting up of Rdif Backup, and we're going to start with main boot. So we do an Rdif Backup remove older than 18 months force from Dat Bird B1 Dadium.rdif main boot. So what that is doing is it's saying, this Rdif Backup can grow basically without limit, and the more often you do a backup, the bigger the files get, because although you only add to it only those things that have changed since the last time you did it. Nevertheless, it does build up. And so 18 months seems like a reasonable max retention time. So the first step is just to remove anything that's older than 18 months, because now's a good time to get rid of them. And you know, it makes this a self-preserving kind of thing. Okay, so here's the actual saving of the files. Rdif Backup includes symbolic links, excludes special files, exclude other file systems. That means since I may be doing a file system that has other things mounted in it, I don't want to include them. I want to print the statistics, and here's what I want to do. I want to copy main boot over to datbird main boot. That's it. It's as simple as that. So I simply have to repeat that process four times. One more a time again for root, home, and H1, and I'm done. So that's how you do Rdif Backup. Now, how do you retrieve the stuff? Well, that's, you know, if you talk about how you do backups without talking about how you do a retrieval, you're deluding yourself, because what good is a backup if you don't know how to get the stuff out of it again after when you are desperate and things have all gone to hell. So what you do is, first of all, you decide when, let's see. I decided to select varspool mail as a subdirectory of the root file system that I want to retrieve, because the mail, my mail file is DAD in this directory, and it changes daily, and it's one of the things that I might conceivably really be desperate to recover, because, you know, I might have deleted a mail message that I desperately need to get back. So let's just see what happens, how we can recover the mail file from the backup. So the first step is to make you have to pick a temporary directory to rebuild into, and I created rebuild as a directory there, and then you do Rdif Backup -R for retrieve. Hang on, my phone's ringing. I'm gonna say, call you back. Bye. Bye. Okay. So this is a way of saying, tell me, wait a minute, what did I do? Did I miss a step here? I did. I have omitted a step from the slide. There is a way of obtaining from Rdif Backup the list of available times that a particular file or directory is available to be retrieved. And that's the step that I omitted here. At any rate, I can't really recover that conveniently for the show here, but I did determine that the time that was available was 2020, 9/12 at 1 a.m. at 10 seconds. And so that's the one that I am going to retrieve and into the B1 rebuild directory. And having done this, what I see in B1 rebuild is these files. These are a bunch of mail files that have been rebuilt as of 12/9. Okay, so my file is 9/12. Root's file is also is 9/11, but that's the best we can do with that specification. So there it is. There's my mail file, and if I think that this is what what I want to retrieve and recover back into the main system, all I have to do now is copy it back into the main system. And that's it. And that's how Rdif Backup works. Now, I guess I can, maybe I can. Well, I could do this in real time so that you could see how it works, but it really does work. So I don't think I will. Huh. Why is my picture not back? Anyway,
Your camera icon is off
my
on
that-
my screen.
yeah, that's probably the reason. Huh. Thank you. Okay, so actually restoring files from the backup is remarkably easy, and as you can see, you can restore either a single file, or you can roll back your entire disk to an earlier date, and it's quite easy to do. And so the sad part is that it only works on your hard disk. What I desperately would like to see is an equivalent program, an Rdif Backup for the world, because I think we need to. I would desperately like to roll back about a month or two and do a do-over. But I guess that's not to be. But if all you want to do is restore your hard drive, have at it. It's a great program. Oh, and there's a man page. There's a man page which goes on for, let's see, 12 pages, which is a lot. On the other hand, there's a lot of options for the Rdif Backup program, and you can spend the whole afternoon reading them.
What is the difference between Rdif and Rsync, Dave?
Okay, the difference is that Rsync brings the target directory up to an image of the source as of the time you do it. In other words, it's a single copy, an instantaneous copy, and it's a perfect copy. Okay, but that's it. Rdif Backup not only does that, but it keeps pointer records to all of the previous updates and allows you to reconstruct any of those prior different files. So the target directory grows without limit, which is why I said at the very outset that the first thing I want to do is restrict the amount of time that I keep backup data for to 18 months, I think it was, because otherwise you fill up the disk eventually. It's not really all that bad. The amount of space taken is only grows slowly. It only grows as the increments to the file system change. If your file system is basically static, it won't grow at all, even though you keep doing Rdif backups to it. But there's nothing to be copied because it's all the same. So as a matter of fact, you can see that in the records of the backup process, because they go very, very quickly if there's nothing much to be backed up. Whereas if you have a dynamic file system with lots of stuff changing, it takes a little longer. It takes maybe an hour or so for this all to run.
You showed how to retrieve a particular file from a particular directory. Is there a way to restore the whole partition?
Yeah, you do the same thing, only you just are less restrictive about what it is you want to back up. It's just a matter of what you specify as to what your target subdirectory is. If you specify that you want to, let's say, for example, that you want to retrieve the entire home the entire home file system, you would simply retrieve the entire home file system rather than home DAD or home DAD's blah blah blah. Okay, is that clear? It's a matter of the specification you give on the retrieve command, and of course you rebuild it into this rebuild directory, which is harmless. You know, you can screw up as badly as you like, and it doesn't hurt anything. It's just that once you have rebuilt it, then you have to decide, well, now what? So, for example, let's say you've rebuilt the entire home directory into this rebuild directory. Now, do you really want to copy it all back onto the working system? It takes a certain amount of guts to do that, but you probably do want to do that.
Have you experimented with other backup programs to see, you know, that this was the best, or is it the one that you've just always used?
Well, I've written a couple of little scripts that use Rsync, and in fact, I have several different backup schemes all working in parallel. For example, I only use Rdif Backup on my main machine because that's the important one to me. But all the other computers around the house here all get backed up with just plain old Rsync. So I maintain an image of each of them on some other machine. And that doesn't give me the ability to go back an arbitrary amount of time in the past on a recovery process, but it's the best I can do as a practical matter.
Rusty has a question. Am I heard clearly?
Yes.
I'm wondering, this may be off topic some, but I'd like to fit it in here. And that is the question of, one of the other purpose of copying files is to share them, but also to show their provenance, which I guess depends on the date modified. So in forensic, in the sharing of files for forensic purposes, very often multiple people need to have not just a file, they may need to have like a whole directory that that contains the same thing, and that also shows that the files are the same ones that existed at a point in time in history. And I guess that is defined by the date modified. But could anyone kind of just educate me about how that is handled? And then I'd like to add that and ask, how does Rdif handle, say if it creates a directory of files, all of which have forensic importance, how does Rdif or how does Rsync, either one, how do they preserve provenance of a file or a directory?
Okay. The Rdif backup preserves all of the standard attributes of a Linux file, the permissions and the ownership and whatnot. Now, the way it does that, as you probably are aware, the owner of a file is known by a UID number, not by the user ID. I am DAD, and all my files are owned by DAD. They show up on an LS listing as owned by DAD, but in fact, they're owned by user 1001. And so all that information is preserved in the saving of the file because it's built into the inode of the file. And if you save the file, you get not only the data of the file, but also the inode of the file. And if you save higher level directories, you will save all the and retrieve all the similar stuff for whatever level up you want to go to. So I don't know, that's the only provenance, quote unquote, there is in Linux that I'm aware of. It's it's a simple and straightforward a bunch of data that is associated with a file that's built into the file system and cannot be separated from it. So if you copy the file system, you copy the data. Rdif backup does copy the data. Now, there is the issue of what happens if the user does not exist on the backup machine. The files are all owned on the source machine by user 1001. That's me. But let's say that I don't exist on the backup machine. Doesn't happen to be true, but let's say that it were true. It would still save the files as owned by user 1001. It wouldn't know who the hell that is. But when you restore it to the original machine, bingo, you're back to it being owned by DID again. Is that clear? Clarify anything?
Yeah. Another question would be possibly or even presumably Rdif does some sorts of checking in the background, like calculating checksums as it is doing a task, and just to check its own accuracy. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it doesn't do any checksumming during processes. But if it does it also have in the man instructions? Does it have what you call variations where it can issue checksums that you keep that are reusable by someone who isn't operating Rdif? Okay, you use Rdif to do a backup and then to do a recovery, but if you're using Rdif to generate a well, that's right. You said Rdif only works on hard disks. You can't use it to put it on another medium for transport, other than another hard disk, I guess.
I don't see why you would want to, but I don't know. I haven't thought about it. As far as the checksumming is concerned, there is, of course, when the program starts out, it has to figure out what is different between the source directory tree and the saved directory tree. So it doesn't do that by comparing bit by bit. It does it by computing checksums and then comparing the checksums, as far as I know. I really don't know how it works internally. It's all written in Python, and I don't speak Python. But I'm assuming that what it does is that it runs checksums. I know. I'm pretty sure that that's what Rsync does. It compares checksums of a particular directory and figures out what has changed and therefore what needs to be copied anew. Now, what form it gets saved in, I do not know for sure. I think that it's just a plain old image.
Yes.
Of the original file system, and you can go look at it and pick it over, but I think that's highly not recommended.
Yeah. Is it fair to say that if Rsync, going back to Rsync, if Rsync detects a difference for a directory or a whole tree of directories or a whole cluster of files, if it detects any change in a checksum, then it will redo the whole image and it will rewrite the entire volume of bytes or bits that involve that image from start to finish. It won't selectively just adjust files. It will literally rewrite the whole image.
No, I don't think that. No, I think it copies literally file by file those that have changed.
Oh, so it does an incremental. It will go to the target image. It will go to the target and just selectively insert and change files that need to be changed.
Yes, yes, I believe that's correct.
Well, it doesn't really
And-
change them as much as add them, right? Because it's still retaining an older version
That's correct. Yes.
until you
Oh,
choose
good.
to delete it.
Huh. So then in theory, a target could possibly have a different, even though the checksums of individual files must be the same in the source and the target, it's possible that if you did an image of the whole target and compared to the whole source, their total checksums may be different, but each of their component files is going to have a proper checksum match.
Well,
It's
the program deals with files. The program doesn't deal with, images of file systems. It just deals with files. It relies on the file system structure of Linux. So as Brent says, when you want to, if you come across when Rdif Backup comes upon a file that needs to be added to the backup, it adds it. And
right.
it doesn't worry about, where it's going to go. It just lets the file system find a place to store it, and, understanding that Linux is capable of retrieving that file again at a future date.
So in that sense, it's not like an ISO image. It's not.
Definitely
rebuilding.
not. It is not at all, ever,
Yes.
not even conceivably an ISO image.
But we use the word image to say that each file is a proper image of each file, but not.
I don't think I use that term, but okay.
You keep
Well-
hinting about sort of almost like a forensics type of approach here. Are you sort of interested in maybe a file integrity monitoring aspect of this?
Oh, well, it's just something that I always, my antenna are always extended on this, because I've had the experience of needing to maintain photographs of a property problem with water management. And these images, these photographs, you're faced with the question, you over time, your computers change, and the old images that you have from back in 2010 or somewhere, you have to be able to say, well, this is a photograph from 2010, but here your computers have all changed during that time interval, and you've had to move these images, and it is a nightmare to me. Just copying files, and sometimes I'll get a copy, and the file is, all of the file dates have changed, and I have to, drill down, and I have to worry about whether or not someone else's computer will show the file to be the same, because sometimes you're sorting these by date, and yet you try to hand off a copy of an image, in this case, like a gift file, and in the process of doing one of your backups, you end up with all of them acquiring a new file date.
Yeah, I think it's not the best idea to rely upon your operating system to manage the metadata for your pictures. Fortunately, picture files allow tagging to keep that metadata within the files themselves. So my opinion, and I've looked into this a bit because I have this growing library of images for the family. And, you know, there's a lot of image management solutions out there, but in every case, you're using the metadata that can be stored inside the image to really manage these things. And if you need to tag them to fix it, there's programs that let you do, you know, a really complex tagging as well. It's something that I'm just afraid to undertake, because I know it's, you know, cleaning up all that stuff is going to be absolutely laborious. But the stuff that's in there already, as far as dates and, you know, GPS coordinates or whatever that may be stuffed in those files, I mean, they can be trusted because I know I haven't touched them. And another thing, if you have concerns about the reliability of data, that's more of like in the realm of file integrity monitoring. And this is something I don't know a whole lot about. I kind of wish Kevin was here to comment on it. But like Tripwire, I know is something, basically say, hey, this file is here and it hasn't changed.
I prefer to think of files as a stream of bits that you simply stuff into a magic box, and when you want to retrieve them, you ask for the operating system to give them back to you, and it does. And how that works inside the magic box is something that I really don't need to know about, but I have to trust. In particular, I happen to know how it works to a limited extent. Namely, the operating system will divvy this essentially infinite stream up into bite-sized chunks called blocks and write them onto the disk, and then, you know, in some haphazard way, which is neither of any interest or concern to me, because I know that when I ask for them back again, the operating system will be able to figure it out. It's as simple as that. I mean, you have to trust the operating system, I think. If we don't trust the operating system, we're all lost.
All right, that sounds like Dave is done. Is this correct?
I am done. Finished.
What exciting stuff have you been doing this past month, Dave?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm not done at all. I had the interesting challenge of having my laptop become unusable. Here's how it became unusable. You're all familiar with the panels in XFCE, right? There's the bottom panel and the top panel. They both went away, disappeared, no panels. So you move the mouse and you wonder how you're going to fire up a new Xterm or a new terminal window. No way to do it. It just can't be done. You can't even switch from one workspace to another. Well, yeah, you can. You can use Control-Alt-Arrow, and you can go to an adjacent workspace that way. But you can't add another open window. So anyway, I figured, well, this has got to be due to a screw up somewhere in the configuration files in my home directory. So let me try creating a brand new user, dummy. And he will start off with a pristine set of XFCE configuration crap. And I did, and sure enough, he got a new set of little, panels at the top and panels at the bottom. except that when I tried to use them, they clicked, they flashed, and they went away. So the next thing I did, thank God for the way I install systems on my computers, is that I rebooted the computer to the previous edition of Fedora 31 in this case. And lo and behold, everything worked. My home directory was okay. All the stuff on the screen worked again. And so that proved to me that, well, I guess it's not my home directory because I'm using the same home directory as I was with Fedora 32. So I said, well, the only solution, apparently something got screwed up along the way with an update. That was my only guess. And so I said, well, I can either start hunting for a needle in a haystack, or I can just bite the bullet and reinstall the whole damn system. So that's what I did. And it's working again, except for the fact that the Bluetooth mouse doesn't seem to want to connect. It connects part of the time, and then after a while it disconnects again, and I can't get it to reconnect without rebooting the machine. It's very frustrating. And I've discovered that I can't send email from the laptop because SendMail cryptically says all, I forget precisely what it said. It's something like requirements not met in the log file, or something like that. So in other words, it's trying to SendMail is trying. The way I send my mail is that I use SendMail to pass it on to my smart host, which is the main machine, and allow the main machine to deliver it wherever. But the main machine won't take it because apparently there is some communication deficiency between the laptop and the main machine. And so far I haven't figured it out. So that's my problem for the week.
Are you going to say anything about the election?
I have already said my say.
He's letting the shirt speak.
I am wearing black. And praying for an Rdif backup that will allow me to roll back the world.
Maybe we can roll back a year and tell some dude.
Why not go back 4 years or so?
We don't have to go back 4 years. I mean, we only have to go back about a month or two.
I think if we can do that, we can go back to a year and tell some dude in Asia not to eat something.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, that would definitely be a good move.
All right, Gene.
Well, I just want to say that some of us.
Wait a minute. I'm not done yet. Okay, there we go.
You don't have to wear it anymore. We did it.
I know. It keeps the sun out of my eyes.
Some of us are pleased with the results. And
what's that, Gene?
Some of us are pleased with the election results.
Yeah, I'll bet there are. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Still counting.
Yeah,
oh, no, they called it. What happened to Rusty? Anyway, I am annoyed with the amount of Linux updates I get. but it's all from my browsers, it seems to be. And I'm wondering if when they stack another couple hundred megs of stuff in the update, are they replacing the files that they're updating, or are they just adding more disk space? I mean, adding more to my disk when they do that. I don't know. I'm sure there's a way I could figure out what they did, but I haven't really been curious enough to go in and look. The other thing, talking about backups, is that my sister's granddaughter went in and managed somehow to delete, talking about picture files, deleted 20-some gigs of pictures that my sister had. So luckily I had backed up her system using a different backup program. I use the one that's kind of built in, used to be built into Ubuntu. It's called Duplicity and Deja Du. And so luckily I had one from back at March, and she doesn't use her computer that much. So we were able to just back up from that, and then she can kind of manually replace anything that she had done since then. But I've always loved that program because it works like a charm, but you have to pretty much back up your whole home directory and replace your whole home directory. You can't go in and choose individual files, which is what I like about your Rdif. So I'll probably be using that in the future because I like the idea of being able to go back and grab an individual file if you lose it or something like that. Plus, then you also have the capability of backing up and restoring the entire home directory, which is what I normally do. I don't go day to day because there again, I don't, the other thing about the duplicity is that, I mean, I guess you could back the entire machine up, but kind of the default is to back up your home directory, excluding downloads and trash. And I kind of like that idea because I can replace the operating system with no big hassle. I've got them all on USBs or DVDs or CDs or whatever. I've got them stored somewhere, or you can go online and download them fresh and get the updated version of them. So backing up the root and those systems is not really that big a. There's the other thing too, a difference between Windows and Linux. Although what I was saying about the updates is that Linux is sneaking up on Windows in the amount of backups that you get, or the amount of updates that you're getting. So I hate to see that happen because that's one of the things I really, 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 really hate about Windows is updating. You can spend days trying to get your computer up to whatever date today is. It just takes so long, and it's so tedious, and I don't like to do other things while I'm updating because I'm afraid I'm slowing down the process. So anyway, how did I get to this? Anyway, I'm just ranting about Linux starting to borrow some of the things I don't like from Windows. So anyway, that's pretty much me. Other than that, everything's hunky-dory.
Okay, Larry?
Don't really have anything new to say. Other than just a comment about backups. Not many people really use Linux compared to phones or Windows these days, and Windows and it's just not something that people are doing with backing up in Windows. It doesn't seem to be something that they are familiar with or have any idea that it's important. Same with phones too. So backup is a serious problem that needs to be dealt with, in my opinion, and for most people, and with the hardware they use. But only professional people, seems to me, that are really concerned with it and try to back things up. So that's just a comment about backups. Seems to me when you're talking about the date stamps on files, I don't really do like file system backups either, because like you said, you just know you can reinstall the operating system. But I do back up personal files on various cloud services online and on several different computers. So usually there's some dates associated with them that are generally preserved when I back up the files. And I did used to do a lot of, or some backup anyway, with CDs, burning on CDs, and there's always the timestamp that the file system or the backup, the software that you use to create the ISO image, usually preserves it, from what I recall. So it doesn't seem to be a big issue with that. And I also put a date on the CD. I manually wrote a date on there so I knew when I created it, and so I knew that file had to be older than the time I created the CD. So that's just a comment about backups. I won't make any comments about the election. Let everybody else talk about that. I'm sort of interested in testing my connection here. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, it's been rock solid.
Great. Because actually I'm using a USB Logitech webcam, and it has a built-in microphone, and the computer has a built-in microphone, but the laptop doesn't have a camera built in. So what I've done is I disabled the microphone on the camera and just use the one in the computer. I think that may be what has helped out. And I did have a little problem when Dave was giving his presentation, where the thing seemed to be locking up or something. I'm using Vivaldi like Gene suggested, but it was having problems, and somehow I managed. I kept didn't want to reboot, but I managed to somehow, bring up my process list and kill the Vivaldi process, and then all of a sudden it came and started working properly again. So I'm not sure. That was one of the first times I haven't had to actually restart the whole computer to get it going again. It still seems to be working too. So
what I did when y'all said my microphone was acting up was I went to Opera and opened it and went to the Jitsi session through it. So I've been running on Opera rather than Vivaldi. I started out on Vivaldi, and that's when my microphone was cutting out. So I don't know. They like I say, they do all kinds of updates. They may have updated my microphone out of existence or something. I don't know.
Well, it seems to be working here as far as I can tell right now.
Well, I'm using Opera now, so maybe they haven't caught on to this update, and maybe that'll happen next, because they're kind of, Opera and Vivaldi are kind of brother and sister, from what I understand. So
my sound seems to be working okay here with Vivaldi, so I don't know.
Yeah.
And I just sort of install Vivaldi every time when I want to use it, just for this meeting, and then it sort of disappears when next month comes up and I reinstall it. So I was getting the latest stuff, the latest Vivaldi.
Whatever works.
This laptop is kind of on the older side. I mean, it is a 64-bit CPU, and I've only got 4 gigs of RAM in it. So I'm kind of impressed with the way it's working. Sometimes it does, my network connection does lock up here sometimes, but I've started just using a wired connection and skipping wireless, and I think that may have helped some. But it has ever hung up too, where I couldn't get the network to work again without restarting the Linux Mint. So I'm starting to wonder if there's something going on with somehow the hardware here not being totally compatible with Linux Mint, because if I drop either the wireless network connection or the wired connection, sometimes I can't get it to come back. The network connection, the computer seems to work, the Mint is working, but just the network software is somehow hung up, which is kind of bizarre. So, but right now it still seems to be going great for like an hour or so, which is pretty nice. So that's it for me.
All right. I think Arnold is lurking again today with the lack of camera and microphone. So Dan?
I think maybe Dan's just recording. I don't know.
Okay. Well, we'll let him pipe up later if he can. Pete? You're on mute, Pete. Still on mute.
How about that?
There you go.
I have not been doing much with computers at all for the last week or two. I've been on the road, traveled from Florida to North Carolina, from North Carolina to New Jersey, from New Jersey up to north of Boston, and then up to Montpelier, Vermont. I'm staying with my daughter for the next few weeks.
Oh, so you delivered all those illegal ballots along the way, huh?
You got it.
Thanks so much, Pete.
That and the COVID virus that I brought along. But I do have a comment. I run mostly old hardware. I buy it at thrift stores or I buy it online at Tiger Direct on their refurb section. So I think my newest Windows computer is probably 6 or 7 years old. My Linux computer is about the same vintage. I'm running this Jitsi video meetup on a Chromebook that I inherited from my wife. And that seems to work the best of everything. And updates when you're running old hardware are an invitation to disaster. There's no way around it. Stuff that was working no longer is supported, and you're up the creek, basically. So I think I've got, last count, roughly 11 computers between desktops, laptops, Chromebooks. And one reason for that is as they get old, they're no longer supported. And I keep them for parts, although they're getting so old, even the parts are not usable anymore. I guess I'm going to have to round up a bunch and take them down to the electronic recycling. I have a giant bag of memory sticks going back to 256 megabyte sticks, which I guess are no longer usable, I'm guessing. But things keep on improving, or so they tell me. So we'll hang in there. That's it for me.
All right. Thank you. Alan? Alan, you're still muted.
Yeah, I'm trying. Okay. All right, there we go. Can you all hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
Just been busy with all the Mount Mitchell, the IP cameras and the Raspberry Pi, the weather station. Everything's working great. I do have one question though, if anyone can give me some advice. I run a Raspberry Pi, and what it does, it runs it when it boots up, it automatically forms a VPN connection to a cloud server, and I have it set up where if that Raspberry Pi reboots, it brings up that VPN connection automatically. And what I don't know, if there's nobody at the remote side to physically reboot that Raspberry Pi, and I lose that VPN connection, that's a problem. So what I've done is I've set up a cron job to automatically reboot that Raspberry Pi once a day. So I know that it's going to instantiate that VPN connection at least for a while. The VPN connection has been rock solid, so it hasn't been an issue. But I'm wondering if, I guess my question is it a problem to reboot that Raspberry Pi, which is in effect a server, on a daily basis, or should I try to just kill that process and restart that OpenVPN service?
I mean, personally, I would only restart it if it fails connectivity. So I would instead script some sort of connectivity check and then either reboot or restart the OpenVPN process. You know, I would assume if restarting the OpenVPN process is reliable. I mean, if it resolves problems 99% of the time, I'd figure a reboot is almost more likely to cause a problem than restarting a process. So, you know, you could have some stupid glitch in rebooting the computer, it may not come back up, and that's going to be not something that's readily resolved. Whereas, you know, restarting the process is far less likely to, you know, put it in a state it's not going to recover from.
Well, let me ask another question. If you have a service that's running on a computer, and you initiate, you issue a command to start that service again, can you have that same service running twice? You have to kill the first instance of it before you you start the second instance of it? In other words, under systemd, for example, we have like systemd service start, you know, whatever that system that you're running, that application, and then you run that same command again. Are you going to have two instances of that service running?
It really depends on the robustness of your init scripts. If you're using like systemctl to start it, if you're using the system, you know, init scripts to manage it, then, you know, it just depends. I mean, yeah, it's possible that your init scripts could not properly kill it and start just a new version of it. But that, you know, they're just scripts. So it's a definite maybe.
Because it's working great now, and the OpenVPN has a keep alive feature, and if it lost the connection, it's going to try to restart on its own. But I'm just worried because I'm not able to physically be there to unplug the power and manually reboot it, whether I'm going to lose that ability to do so remotely. Anyway, that's basically my question. The other two items is, does anybody have any experience with solar Wi-Fi systems, like solar-powered either radios or cameras?
Not me.
I'd like to, but I don't. Alan, I've got a question. Could you, you could possibly set something in the BIOS of the Raspberry Pi to allow a remote boot or remote command to boot? Could that be done?
Well, I've got several cron jobs that are, cron tabs that are, like I say, the one that is most applicable to the question I'm asking. It actually physically reboots that computer every morning, and my VPN connection comes right back up. Everything works fine, but it may be a little hard on the hardware. In terms of the Raspberry Pi uses a micro SD card, and I don't know whether it's going to shorten the life of that SD card by rebooting it every day. What Brent said is run a script just to detect if it loses the connection, that script would restart it. But what I'm afraid of, especially coming into the winter where I'm not going to have physical access there, I just, if the power goes out, it'll reboot on its own, and that's fine. But if I lose that VPN connection, I lose the ability to communicate with that device remotely. And that's why I figure once a day at least, I can always be assured that it's going to restart that connection, at least for a limited amount of time.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to protect you, to basically anything, up to like a kernel panic, right? Obviously, if the kernel panics, it's not going to continue to run its cron jobs. I don't think you really have to be worried about those reboots. If you're worried about the SD card and its longevity, just sort of just turn off all the logging you can. But it's not going to be that much. I mean, there's a reboot does involve some writes, but it's not that intensive.
Well, I'm really happy the way that the system is working, and basically, without doing any port forwarding or dealing with a router on site, this thing basically phones home to my my VPN server in the cloud, and then from my own host, my computer at home or anywhere on the internet, I just start up that VPN, and I'm on that same subnet as this other machine, and I can just communicate beautiful. It's amazing. So maybe you all want to consider that sometime. It's very easy to start a VPN service, and then you can always instead of communicating directly, through your router, you can just go right through your VPN, and you're on the same subnet. It's great.
Yeah, I have something somewhat similar to that with my brother in Italy, because his computer goes down every now and then, and I rely on the WireGuard connection between him and me. But it can only, the whole wireless connection can only be established from his end, and I don't really want to trust him to do it manually. So I have a bunch of scripts that do something similar to what you're talking about, Alan. And I do have a test which runs every now and then to make sure that it can still ping my machine here in the US. And if it can't, it takes steps to restore the connection. But I don't cause it to reboot. I don't, well, I wouldn't worry about the rebooting so much with the Raspberry Pi. I'm with Brent. I don't think there's much writing that goes on in the rebooting process, so that this SD chip, I think the SD chip can withstand a very large amount of reading. It's just that it can't withstand a huge amount of writing. So as long as it doesn't write, I would think that rebooting would be okay.
Well, so far I haven't dropped the VPN connection, so I mean that's been pretty solid in itself. But something could happen that would possibly cause to lose that connection, and I want to make sure it comes back up automatically with no intervention on my part.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it ain't broke, so maybe just don't fix it.
Right.
All right, you done, Alan?
Yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Hey, Rusty?
Oh, am I on? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Man.
Okay. Okay, I am tied up with so many projects that are non-computer related. The main thing when I return to computers is I just hope. I pray. I'm completing an addition on a house. I've been doing a lot of medical journal reading on topics to help out one friend or another on cancer diagnoses. It's amazing what's happening in the different treatment modalities. And I want to really seriously get into my data cluster of LiDAR point fields for some landscape modeling and some property development. And so all this stuff leads back to computers one way or another. Even looking up references on a house edition and looking through the building codes and all this. I mean, every time you turn around, you're saving vital files and trying to find references on the internet that are going to be stable and available in the future and remembered by you. So it's amazing the tools that we need to be productive on computers. And then finally, last but not least, like Pete mentioned, I have all kinds of hardware that with the various family members have available. Like I've got a couple of HP computers that I would like to get the right Linux loaded on, and not to disturb, once again, not to disturb the Windows 10 installations that may be on these by now. And currently I want to try to set up Kubuntu on these, and having had 2 failures of doing dual boot installation on Mint, I've walked through in Kubuntu to the point where they're ready to do install, and nowhere do I see an explicit message from the installer program that says, bingo, we are aware that you have Windows installed. We are prepared to install as in dual boot fashion. Is this okay? In other words, it's just the explicitness is just lacking in the. Here you have a full screen from a installer program that could be telling you what it's preparing to do, and the signals are not there. It's just, when you consider all of the vagaries of installs now, and there aren't even any upfront instructions to ask you to define how you might be affected or not by what is it, UEI, forget the acronym. The mode of legacy boot versus
UEFI, yeah.
Say it again.
UEFI.
UEFI.
Oh, UEFI, yes.
Oh, I don't know what the hell it stands for.
Yeah, I continue to, every now and then I find a little extra mental capacity to read, and every time I get into it for a half an hour, by the time I get to the end of the article, I've already glazed over and can't recall the relevance of everything at the beginning. If you really get a good article, even then, there's so many. It's a permutation of multiple variables. What kind of master boot record do you have? Do you have GPT partitioning or not? It goes on, and what amazes me is that every one of these install programs that we have from the different distributions sort of, it doesn't give explicit guidelines saying, do this, do that beforehand, and put yourself in a category according to these parameters so that we can respond to your choice of a safe install. If anyone
Rusty,
has installed,
I don't know about your version of Ubuntu, but mine, once you get to a screen that says, we see that you have an operating system installed. Do you want to install it ex Ubuntu or Ubuntu in parallel, or do you want to? It gives you another option, and then at the bottom it says do something else. And I always punch the do something else button, because that way you've got control over your partitions, because it'll take you to a partitioning tool. But it does, that's, while it's not implicit, it doesn't give you a warning that says, you may lose all your data or anything. It does say you've got Windows installed. Do you want to install this in addition or do something else? So always do something else.
At least the latest Ubuntu seems to have failed to be explicit. I guess I may just move over to Ubuntu and even avoid Mint. In the past, I have managed my own partitions and managed to blow away Windows every time using Mint. And that's preparing partitions ahead of time on my own. So I would have a partition that I would point for I would point to a partition to be root and another partition to be home in each case. And for some reason, in each time, it managed to, I guess it has something to do with the not revising the bootloader of the existing Windows. And it has something to do with not doing chain bootloading from leaving the Windows bootloader in place and modifying the Windows bootloader to a chain bootloader. I'm not sure where it is, but I've never learned what I did wrong. And that's because there's no there's no checklist of telling the user, we're assuming this. Are these conditions true? Do you want us to proceed with these conditions as we see them? I guess I'll give Ubuntu a try. Does Ubuntu now have only one? I mean, if Ubuntu clearly gives a message that's dependable about dual boot installation, I will just move over to Ubuntu.
Well, all the flavors should have that same screen. I mean, they all basically use the same installer. So Kubuntu should have. I have installed Kubuntu before, but it's been a while, so I don't recall. But they all should have that screen because it's basically the same program. You just get a lot.
It would be by sharing the name Ubuntu, but I do not see that screen anywhere.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm on to the edge of the cliff where it says, "Are you ready to install?" And I've always backed away.
Well, if you want to get together sometime, I'll be glad to walk through it with you.
I will give a try. Plain Ubuntu, not Mint Ubuntu, not X Ubuntu, just plain Ubuntu. I will give a try.
Yeah. Well, you can always, as you say, you can always get to the edge of that cliff and then back off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm somewhere in between my hopes and my fears. That's where
Ain't we all?
If you have that ready, like at the next meeting, or even today, if you have it right next to you, you could, if you've joined by phone on Jitsi, you could just aim the camera at the screen and we could follow along and watch what you're doing.
No, I don't have anything ready, but I do have one small question on a machine that is very old. It's a very old Dell desktop at my sister's home. When it comes up, it gives a message during the pre-boot process in which it says CMOS checksum error, default loading. CMOS checksum error. Oh, it's plural. CMOS checksum errors, plural. Default loaded.
Good to me.
What is the meaning?
I think that probably means you need a new battery on your motherboard.
Oh, okay. Yes, a date problem. Okay. The default is probably the year 2001 or 1980, January the 1st, 1980, or some such thing. Let's see if. No, it seems to know what it is, but okay. The CMOS is the it must be some memory that is CMOS memory that does not require a battery for that's in other words, it's dependent on a maintained charge for a period of time without a battery required to have CMOS is.
I don't remember, but if my memory's telling me CMOS errors are your boot ROM on the older machines. they had a CMOS chip that you had to have that battery in, and it may
Right. And I believe
you may have
CMOS, once you,
to have,
I believe it holds data in a sense with a minuscule charge, which is not, it holds data without battery power in an off mode.
I don't remember. Not sure.
Maybe not. We need Ed Comer here, and he would tell us.
We're
Yeah, I'd bet that you replace that battery, that issue is going to go away.
Okay.
Will it continue on past that, Rusty, or does that halt the boot?
It does go past it. Apparently, that's what defaults loaded means.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know what the defaults are, and I don't know if they're talking about time or
Well, it's your
talking about
default,
more than time.
it's your default BIOS settings, probably. Whatever
BIOS. Okay.
whatever the BIOS was set for at the factory.
Mhm. Well, that's
So actually,
That's
there is very little that I ever change out of the BIOS. Maybe a boot order or things that don't boot or whatever. But you could probably go with the defaults and get a long way down the road.
mhm.
All done, Rusty?
That's it for me.
I think I got everybody else. Correct me if I'm wrong. A few things a few comments I held off on responding. Larry was talking about backups and how people don't really do backups in the mobile and the Windows ecosystems, and I kind of have to disagree. I think once upon a time people were very sloppy about their backups, but now with cloud services, especially more like automatic cloud services, OneDrive, what have you, in the Windows world, I think that situation's improving, and in the mobile world, it's largely automatic. A lot of people have their Google Drive backing up pretty much everything important they have on their phone, or whatever the Apple equivalent is. I'm not an Apple guy, so I have no idea. But yeah, I do know that even before the cloud stuff, the iTunes backup would largely back up everything important. Hold on, I got to boot a cat out of my room. Sorry about that one. He would absolutely pee on everything. So yeah, that the mobile ecosystems really are pretty good about backing up your important stuff. Yeah, so I don't worry that much about what's on my phone because I know all my pictures are going up to the cloud. I do have to get better about what I have on my computers, and generally I just back up my home directory because I'm updating my operating system and tweaking things, and I am like in my Pax Romana of Linux right now because everything with the last installation just worked out of the box, and I don't think it's ever been quite this good. Like all little problems I was having just went away, and no new problems have since raised their heads, and it's just I'm in a it's just it's amazing how well everything's working. I just jinxed it. I realized that, but yeah, I'll stop talking. Gene was talking about the number of updates, and I agree, but working in the Windows world, and I personally am not super involved with updates, but I'm tangentially involved with updates. And in Windows, when you do the Windows update process, you're updating Windows. And that's about it. Maybe a handful of other things get wrapped up. Some partner vendors, Microsoft gets involved with. They update on their behalf, but it's the operating system. Whereas when with Linux, you're really updating every application you have, assuming that you're using your package manager to install it, and that is awesome. That is like something that it's a nirvana that we really would love to get to with the Windows ecosystem, and we're starting to move in that direction in our corporate environment by using outside products, not using the Windows products for updates, but things like Adobe's products and browsers, and it's hard to keep up. Obviously, weird third-party stuff might be an issue with Linux stuff as well, but like we have these Linux portal servers, and they run Drupal, and Drupal and up is really its own thing. But everything else, I just tell the vendor who supports these things, okay, just run the Yum upgrade and make sure it gets updated. And it's one command and everything else gets done. So, it's only the oddball stuff that you install outside the package manager that you have to worry about at all. And that's pretty great. In this past month, really just in the past week or so, we've been in a heightened state of security regarding ransomware and sort of more concerted attacks against the healthcare sector. That's probably the issue Pete was talking about, and it's been happening in quite a few hospital systems. We have not been affected so far, but we are doing everything we can to protect ourselves, which means we basically told all our users to stop clicking on anything in emails, stop, opening any image files, just don't do it. Which meant they forwarded them all to me saying, "Is this safe?" Which that is not a job you want, let me tell you, is to read everybody's email for them. But we stopped doing that once we realized that the primary vector in these attacks is not just phishing. So I think we did raise our phishing awareness a lot, and that's great. But we're just doing everything we can to lock everything down, and now we're sort of exploiting the heightened security awareness to just sort of just get a lot of things done, whether or not they're particularly germane to the current attack. So, for example, there is this sort of lockdown that I've been meaning to do. I have this. I've for the past 10 years I've been trying to segment our network better, because once upon a time everyone just had these big open networks, right? This is your network, and then you have a firewall, and then you have the internet, and you just feel safe in your little network here. However, if you have a network of, say, 10,000 hosts, and this something is able to attack this little part of the network, then you have no protection for anything else. So by segmenting our network, we provided protection from things moving laterally within our network. And one thing I'm doing is I sort of have this notion of clients talk to servers, right? Clients should not talk to clients. So on our user workstation VLAN, it's pretty much locked down so that things can't really get to it. But I have not implemented protection such that this user workstation within the same VLAN cannot talk to this user workstation. So Cisco has VLAN access lists that can be applied at the switch level, so that within a VLAN you can say what can talk to what. So what I'm going to finally do, which I've been meaning to do for a long time, is finally put in those protections saying that between hosts on this user VLAN, this guy cannot talk to this guy. It will probably break some things. I'll probably have to undo it in part here and there, provide some exceptions, but it will be a level of protection that we have not had previously. So I'm looking forward to getting that done. And just little stuff like that, that's not that little, but little tweaks that we've been putting off. We're using this focus on security to basically figure that we have permission to maybe break some things and move forward in ways that we have not moved forward before. I think that's it for me.
Brent, is there any guidance out there as to what kind of systems are vulnerable? Is it what you were saying, penetrating into an older machine or an older network or something, and then getting into the main stuff, or is it malicious, like malware or viruses?
If I were to guess how if I got the call today, we've been hacked, I can almost guarantee it started with a phish. Someone clicked on an email that said, you need to change your password, or your email is going to be deactivated, or any number of urgent messages that somehow got through our spam filter, got through, X, Y, and Z, and the user, panic, clicks on it, and then says, here's my username and password. Which then, that's why one of the next things actually we're looking to do, that I'm actively working on, is multi-factor authentication, specifically for anything internet facing. Because then, the person, once they have credentials, they can get on our Outlook web access, they can get on some of our other remote access stuff, and then start to do stuff inside our network. It wouldn't take that much expertise, I'm thinking, to go from having a user account to having some sort of shell access on something internally. And then with a little bit more expertise than that, elevating it to an administrator privilege on that machine. Once they have that, they can look at certain password activity, like hashes that have been exchanged into memory on that machine, using software called Mimikatz, which basically allows you to steal administrator hashes for stuff that's accessed the machine that you're on. And then you can use those credentials to do other things on the network. So there's ways to basically go from a phish to full administrative access to the entire network, at which point they can do anything they want and we're done. So at every step, we need to protect things. But again, I don't think it's likely that we would be hacked by someone actively penetrating, say, all our web applications. It's not impossible. There may be something there. That is something that we do penetration tests on a yearly basis to make sure that stuff like that is dealt with. But I think the lower bar is our user-based attacks, social engineering-based attacks like phishing.
And what do you do about backups with 1,000 sites, stations?
Well, I mean, user workstations don't get backed up because they shouldn't ever contain data. Certainly, they shouldn't ever contain important data. They shouldn't contain confidential data. If a workstation is compromised, we yank it from the network, we reimage it. That's actually something that we implemented in this sort of panic mode. Is our antivirus software has the capability to isolate a machine for a certain period of time. You basically press a button, say you're off the network. The client software locks itself down, and the machine is effectively isolated. You can't get to it at all for a certain period of time. And then and if it can be unlocked, it has to be unlocked from the workstation itself with like a code key. So it's a very effective way. So if it's out there trying to attack other things, trying to access shares and locking them down with ransomware, it can be stopped in a very quick period of time. So what we did is we increased the number of people who had access to do this, to lock down our machines. So if we got a call saying this bad thing is happening, we had a bunch of people we can call and say, hey, lock this machine down if you can. So that's one thing we did. So workstations, we don't back up, but it's really file shares. Like, for better or for worse, we've put most of our important stuff in just a handful of places. So those are the places that get backed up. And they're backed up in multiple ways. There's, sort of nearline backup, there's, disk backup, there's tape backup, there's, sort of multiple versions that can be accessed. And I'm not the backup guy, so that's about as technical as I could get on it. But it is there, and the one thing I know we're not very good at is testing our tape, like long-term tape backup restores. That's kind of a Hail Mary. If we have to rely on tape, it's going to be a very scary time for quite a few people.
I would think that it would be a big problem to figure after you push the button and disconnected a workstation from the network. Then the issue becomes, how do I know whether it's safe to reconnect it?
If we're that worried, it's going to get pulled off and reimaged. There will be no trace of its previous self anymore. Again, there's really no reason we can't do this. In my ideal security world, every workstation is essentially a thin client. It holds no data. It holds no unique configuration. It holds nothing that's going to take more than a handful of minutes to recreate. And that, you pull another one off the roll and flush the old one.
Sounds ideal.
Well, it is getting to be about that time. Anyone else have anything important before we call it?
Let's hope that we're all still around in a month, right? Well, never been to a Costco.
Yeah, that's unfair. You got Greenville and Spartanburg both have one. And then Charlotte's got all the North Carolinas just about. Oh, well. See you guys.